I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone? Stand By Me wasn't just a nostalgic coming-of-age story. It was a production nightmare that nearly killed its child stars, sparked real-world violence, and created one of cinema's most dangerous train sequences ever filmed. Behind the scenes, Rob Reiner was threatening young actors with death. Four 12-year-old boys were dodging actual moving trains, and Stephen King himself was battling the studio over a title that would change everything. From Corey Feldman's beer-soaked wardrobe to River Phoenix's secret method acting techniques, this production was chaos wrapped in 1950s nostalgia. Child actors were terrorized, stunt doubles were injured, and one deleted scene was so dangerous that it nearly shut down filming entirely. Today, we're diving into 20 weird facts about Stand By Me that reveal just how wild this production really was. And stick around for our bonus fact because what happened to the original locomotive will blow your mind. Ready to take the journey back to Castle Rock? Let's go. Rob Reiner became a child-threatening dictator. What audiences didn't know was that the iconic train sequence nearly became a real tragedy. Director Rob Reiner actually threatened the young actors by saying, "You see those guys? They don't want to push that dolly down the track anymore. I told them if they weren't worried that the train was going to kill them, then they should worry that I was going to." It wasn't child psychology, it was pure intimidation. The crew was exhausted from multiple takes, and the locomotive was bearing down on four terrified kids who couldn't act scared enough for Reiner's vision, so he made them genuinely afraid, not of the train, but of him. The terror you see on screen? That's real fear, manufactured by a director who crossed every line of child safety to get his shot. Female stunt doubles nearly died for the train scene. The most dangerous sequence in the film wasn't performed by the child actors at all. The train scene took a full week of shooting, making use of four small adult female stunt doubles with closely cropped hair made up to look like the film's protagonists. Plywood planks were laid across the trestles to provide a safer surface on which the stunt doubles could run. But safer didn't mean safe. These women were racing across an 80-foot-tall trestle with a real steam engine thundering behind them. The plywood planks were a last-minute safety addition after the first day of filming proved too dangerous. One stunt double nearly fell through the gaps between railroad ties during the first take. The safety planks were the only thing standing between these performers and an 80-foot drop onto rocks below. The boys tortured Corey Feldman with actual beer. Method acting took a twisted turn when the young cast decided to psychologically torture their co-star. During the making of the film, the young boys soaked Corey Feldman's clothes in beer, then dried them, so he smelled like a wino. This wasn't scripted hazing, it was cruel reality. Feldman's character Teddy came from an abusive home with an alcoholic father, and his castmates thought making him literally smell like alcohol would enhance his performance. The beer-soaked wardrobe created an authentically miserable experience for Feldman, who had to endure the stench and sticky discomfort throughout multiple takes. It was child actors tormenting another child actor in the name of realism. Real leeches attacked the cast in Swamp Hell. The leech pond sequence wasn't Hollywood magic, it was genuine biological warfare against child actors. In the swamp scene with the leeches, real leeches were apparently used during filming. Production didn't use rubber props or CGI creatures. They dumped actual blood-sucking parasites on 12-year-old boys. The logistics were horrifying. Wranglers had to collect hundreds of live leeches and release them into the filming location. The boys had to submerge themselves in leech-infested water, allowing the creatures to attach to their bodies while cameras rolled. Medical personnel stood by to remove the leeches between takes, but the psychological trauma was immediate and lasting. River Phoenix later admitted the scene gave him nightmares about parasites for months. A British director abandoned the ship before filming. The director of the film was Rob Reiner, who stepped in when the British director selected for the job bailed on the producers. But this wasn't a simple creative difference. The original director read Stephen King's novella The Body and declared it unfilmable due to its dark themes involving child death and trauma. Castle Rock Entertainment was left scrambling with sets built, locations scouted, and young actors already cast. Reiner stepped in as a last-minute replacement, bringing his television comedy background to what many considered an impossible adaptation. The British director's abandonment actually saved the project. His vision was reportedly much darker and more disturbing than what eventually reached theaters. Jerry O'Connell was literally digging in dirt for hours. The opening scene, where Vern searches for buried pennies, became an endurance test that bordered on child abuse. Production forced Jerry O'Connell to spend entire days crawling under a porch, digging through actual dirt and debris, while cameras captured multiple angles of his frantic searching. The buried treasure wasn't even real. Prop masters scattered a few pennies in the dirt each morning, but O'Connell had to dig as if his life depended on finding them. His hands were torn up from splinters and rocks. His knees were bloodied from crawling on rough wooden planks. But Reiner demanded take after take, insisting that O'Connell's desperation looked too staged. The authentic exhaustion you see on screen came from hours of actual physical misery. The train was moving at lethal speeds. Telephoto compression was used to make the train appear much closer than it actually was. But what audiences don't realize is that the locomotive was still moving at dangerous speeds, even with camera tricks creating the illusion of proximity. McLeod River Railroad Locomotive Star 25 was a 2-6-2 steam engine weighing over 100 tons, and it couldn't stop quickly even if something went wrong. The telephoto lenses made the train look like it was breathing down the actors' necks, but in reality, it was traveling fast enough to kill anyone who stumbled or fell on the tracks. The camera trickery wasn't just for dramatic effect. It was the only way to create suspense without actually murdering child actors. River Phoenix used dangerous method acting techniques. River Phoenix's haunting performance as Chris Chambers came from a dark place that worried everyone on set. Phoenix was already experimenting with dangerous method acting techniques, drawing from his own traumatic childhood experiences with an abusive religious cult. Between takes, Phoenix would disappear into himself, staying in character as the damaged, vulnerable Chris even when cameras weren't rolling. Cast and crew noticed him becoming increasingly withdrawn and emotional throughout filming. His breakdown scene, where Chris reveals his stolen milk money trauma, was so intense that Reiner called cut early, concerned that Phoenix was having a genuine emotional crisis rather than acting. The junkyard scene featured real psychotic dogs. The encounter with Milo Pressman and his attack dog wasn't staged with trained movie animals. Production used an actual junkyard with a genuinely aggressive guard dog that had already bitten multiple trespassers in real life. The acting dog was basically a barely controlled weapon. Animal wranglers were positioned just out of frame, ready to intervene if the dog actually attacked the young actors. But the terror in the boys' eyes was authentic. They were genuinely afraid of being mauled by an animal that had a documented history of violence. The scene's raw intensity came from real fear of real danger. Stephen King hated the original title. Before it became Stand By Me, the film was called The Body, the title of Stephen King's original novella, but focus groups found the title too morbid and confusing, leading to months of heated battles between King, the studio, and the marketing department. But before we reveal what King's alternate title was, go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to get into some truly insane production stories that most people have never heard. We've got deadly train stunts, real-world violence, and a bonus fact that connects this movie to a tragedy that happened decades later. King wanted to maintain the integrity of his source material, but Columbia Pictures was terrified that The Body would be mistaken for a horror film or a documentary about corpses. The compromise title, Stand By Me, was actually suggested by a marketing executive who heard the Benny King song playing in a restaurant and realized it perfectly captured the film's themes of friendship and loyalty. The dead body was a terrifying practical effect. The corpse of Ray Brower wasn't a mannequin or rubber dummy. It was an elaborate practical effect that traumatized everyone who saw it. Special effects artists created a disturbingly realistic dead child using latex, hair, and detailed makeup that made the body look like it had been decomposing for days. Kiefer Sutherland's Switchblade was real. Ace Merrill's intimidation tactics weren't just acting. Kiefer Sutherland was carrying an actual switchblade throughout filming. The prop department provided a real knife rather than a rubber replica, believing it would make Sutherland's performance more authentic and threatening. This created genuine danger during the confrontation scenes. The knife was sharp enough to cause serious injury, and Sutherland had to be extremely careful during his aggressive physical performances. The menace in his eyes wasn't just character work. He was constantly aware that one wrong move could send someone to the hospital. Filming locations became tourist crime scenes. Principal photography began June 17, 1985, in Oregon and lasted 60 days, with filming taking place in numerous small towns throughout the state, with Brownsville standing in for the story's fictional Castle Rock. But the production's impact on these small communities was devastating. Teenage gangs began imitating Ace Merrill's crew, carrying knives and harassing younger kids in the exact locations where the movie was filmed. Local police reported a spike in juvenile crime that directly correlated with scenes from the movie. The railroad tracks became a dangerous hangout spot where kids would dare each other to stand in front of oncoming trains, recreating the film's most dangerous sequence. Richard Dreyfuss recorded his narration in secret. The older Gordy's narration, performed by Richard Dreyfuss, was recorded under unusual circumstances that created the film's haunting, reflective tone. Dreyfuss insisted on recording his voiceover work alone in the studio, without director Rob Reiner present, because he felt the material was too emotionally raw for outside observation. Dreyfuss would arrive at the recording studio at night, after regular sessions had ended, and spend hours alone with the script and a microphone. His performance has a confessional, almost therapeutic quality, because he was genuinely processing childhood trauma while speaking Gordy's words. The isolation and vulnerability you hear in his voice came from a real place of emotional excavation. The campfire scene sparked real violence. Gordy's ghost story about Lardass Hogan's revenge became a template for real-world retaliation among bullied teenagers. The scene depicts a humiliated fat kid getting revenge on his tormentors by causing a mass vomiting incident, and it inspired copycat pranks that sometimes turned violent. Schools across the country reported incidents of bullying victims putting ipecac syrup or other vomit-inducing substances in food served to their bullies. Several teenagers were hospitalized, and at least one incident resulted in a lawsuit against the film's distributors. The Lardass story was removed from some television broadcasts after it was linked to multiple poisoning incidents. Wil Wheaton's performance came from real trauma. Gordy's emotional breakdown wasn't just acting. Wil Wheaton was drawing from genuine childhood trauma that he later revealed in therapy and interviews. His parents' divorce, his struggles with depression, and his feelings of invisibility within his own family all fed into his devastatingly authentic performance. Wheaton later admitted that filming Stand By Me was simultaneously therapeutic and traumatizing. He was processing real grief about his fractured family relationships while cameras captured his most vulnerable moments. The raw emotion you see on screen came from a 12-year-old boy genuinely grappling with abandonment and loss. The film's success destroyed River Phoenix. Stand By Me launched River Phoenix to international stardom, but the sudden fame proved devastating to his mental health. Phoenix was unprepared for the intensity of celebrity culture and began using drugs as a coping mechanism almost immediately after the film's release. His co-stars later revealed that Phoenix's personality changed dramatically after Stand By Me's success. The sensitive, thoughtful boy who had delivered such a powerful performance became increasingly erratic and self-destructive. The film that should have been his greatest triumph became the catalyst for a downward spiral that ended with his death from a drug overdose 7 years later. Rob Reiner's direction style traumatized child actors. Reiner's approach to directing children involved psychological manipulation that would be considered abusive by today's standards. He would deliberately upset the young actors before emotional scenes, telling them disturbing stories or making them think about tragic personal experiences to generate authentic tears. During Gordy's breakdown about his brother's death, Reiner made Wil Wheaton recall his own experiences with loss and abandonment. For River Phoenix's emotional scenes, Reiner would remind him of his traumatic childhood in a religious cult. The authentic emotion on screen came from children who were being deliberately, psychologically triggered by an adult authority figure. The movie's rating battle nearly killed its release. Stand By Me faced an uphill battle with the MPAA ratings board, which initially wanted to give it an R rating for language and mature themes. This would have prevented the film's target audience, teenagers, from seeing it without adult supervision. The profanity-laden dialogue, particularly the boys' casual use of the F-word and other strong language, was considered too extreme for a PG-13 rating. Reiner and the studio fought for months, eventually agreeing to cut some of the more explicit language. But the compromise version still pushed boundaries, and many theater owners were reluctant to show a film about children that contained such mature content. The train scene deleted footage was too dangerous to release. There's a reason you've never seen the complete train sequence. Some of the footage was deemed too dangerous and disturbing to include in any version of the film. The deleted scenes show the stunt doubles much closer to the actual locomotive, with one performer nearly falling through the trestle gaps. An exclusive outtake from the railroad tracks scene shows Corey Feldman's Teddy-tempting fate to the horror of his friends. But even more extreme footage exists in the vault, shots of the train bearing down on performers who were mere feet from death. The footage was locked away, not just for safety reasons, but because it was so genuinely terrifying that test audiences were traumatized by watching it. Bonus fact: the locomotive used for the scene, MCRR-25, is still in daily operation for excursion service on the Oregon Coast Scenic Railroad. But what most people don't know is that this same train has been involved in multiple real-life fatalities since the movie's release. The locomotive that terrorized 4 fictional boys has actually killed real people. Train enthusiasts and movie fans seeking the Stand By Me experience have been struck and killed while attempting to recreate scenes from the film. The Oregon Coast Scenic Railroad has had to install warning signs specifically referencing the movie, begging visitors not to walk on the tracks or attempt to outrun the train. The machine that created movie magic has become an instrument of real-world tragedy, making Stand By Me's fictional danger horrifyingly prophetic. Stand By Me wasn't just a movie about childhood, it was childhood under assault. The production put real children in genuine danger to capture authentic emotion and created a film so powerful that it inspired both healing and harm in audiences worldwide. Behind every nostalgic frame lies a story of exploitation, manipulation, and the brutal cost of cinematic perfection. What other dark secrets are hiding in your favorite childhood movies? Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments which film you want us to investigate next. Because in Hollywood, the real story is always more disturbing than what makes it to the screen. The Body was just the beginning.